So chances are you don't know what it is. I'm actually going to spend a few questions here. So who knows what Postman Flows is, by a show of hands? Okay, we have 2. 3. That's more than I expected. Who knows what Postman is? Aha, we have a few more. Cool. I think that was pretty much everyone. No shame at all. Just anyone here doesn't know what Postman is? Okay, that's fine. And now, anyone knows what APIs are? Using APIs, cool. Very cool. So Postman, just as a quick disclaimer, is a tool to help you with everything API-wise, whether you're producing APIs or consuming APIs. So we help with every part of the way. So with that said, quick note about myself. This is my name. It's not I was going to say it's not a made-up name. It is actually a made-up name, but it is still my name. Pretty easy to find because I happen to be the only one with this name in the world, I think. So if you want to find me, find me. Otherwise, you can just come and see me at the booth. That works as well. I'm leading developer advocacy at Postman. So what we do is just going around chatting to people about what may be relevant to them. But we have a community of about 25 million users. So sometimes it's hard to find what's exactly relevant to you. So we try to keep it broad and we try to keep it interesting for everyone. In these specific sessions, the things that we're going to look at, give an intro to Postman Flows, making sure that everyone knows what it is, because I think most of you do not. Then we'll talk about some use cases, why you may be interested in it, and I'll then jump right in, going to start sharing live coding and live building. I mentioned in like 5 minutes ago, if you want to follow along, there's an opportunity. So take your laptop out and you'll be able to go through the same workshop with me. That said, I'm the only one, so if there's like some issues, I won't be able to just come and help you, each of you. Hopefully there shouldn't be any issues though. All you need is a free Postman account and then you can get started. Come on in, no, go on. And then just resources, where to learn more, and some Q&A. So there's a specific time for Q&A at the end, but that said, if you have questions at any point during the session, just raise your hand, let me know, and I should be able to answer. With that said, here's what you should know by the end of the session. If you don't, you can come and complain to me directly. But ideally, you'll understand what are the basic blocks for low-code applications in Postman. You'll learn how to utilize Postman Flows. So even though you're not doing it yourself during the session, you should have the resources and the knowledge to do it later on. And then you'll learn how to organize it, share it with other people, deploy it for other people to use, etc. So with that said, I'm going to jump to the next slide, which will give you, hopefully, kind of an idea of what Postman Flows is. But there's a lot of stuff happening on this slide. So I'm just going to give you kind of like the definition of Postman Flows. So Postman Flows is a visual programming language designed specifically for APIs. But instead of writing the code yourself, so like saying, here's my post endpoint, here's my get endpoint, these are the query parameters that I require, etc., or what I'm going to call, you can do it with this human-driven language, which is kind of boxes and links. So maybe you've used other low-code tools like this one. There's, if you've done like orchestrations, there's some tools that do that. If you work in IoT or maybe with Unity for gaming, there's also some visual tools like this one. So it just simplifies the process of hiding complexities by making it easy to see what's happening. So for example, here you can see the data that's flowing. So there's a request on the top left. Then it's looping over the results, sending it to other things, and we display the results directly. I'm going to give a quote from our CEO, which says, APIs are the building blocks of modern software. However, those blocks have not always been accessible to everyone. And the point of Postman Flows is that any user anywhere can just get several APIs. It can be a data API, SMS API, user API, pair them together and build something out of them. And it is for everyone. So as I mentioned, it's on the free plan. So if you want to play along with it, you just need a free plan tier. So whether you're student, professional, or retired, anyone can play with Postman Flows. So hopefully we'd get from there. So 2 main objectives of Postman Flows. One of them I already mentioned in the past. hide the complexities, that's the second one, hide the complexities of modern programming languages and allow non-technical users to create API workflows, but also to present them to others. So even if you're a developer and you have an API workflow that you want to talk about to your VP or maybe your marketing team, your sales engineers, etc., you can build a flow in Postman and then show it to them to see what's happening instead of showing them code or maybe a flow on a slide deck that is not really working. And simplify the implementation of complex real-world businesses, again, because you have chaining, but you can see what's happening, and you can link these blocks together. So that's the high level of Postman flows. Any questions so far? Because then I'm going to jump into the technical side of things.
Can you give an example?
Yeah.
Non-tech user uses.
Yeah, so non-tech users, for example, there's a lot of non-tech people that have a connected home. Maybe you have connected lights, a connected temperature sensor. These things have APIs, right? So you would be able to use Postman flows to call the API from your temperature sensor. Then you can have a block that does a condition. If the temperature is higher than, I don't know, 20 degrees or something, then turn on the light. It doesn't make sense to turn on the light when it's cold, I don't know. But just the point being, this is a very use case that anyone can play with. It's just having connected things at home. So, and orchestration. So you have some data coming in, some conditions in the middle, and then you can take an action. So that's a very simple flow. Yep.
How is it different from if it's that last one?
So the ID is the same. The main difference is if this, then that, or you can talk about IFTTT, Zapier, etc. They have a limited set of things. This is fully customizable. So any API, even if it's an API that you built yourself, you'll be able to integrate with it. Even if you have something running localhost, you can call that from here. So that's the main difference. It's just the customization of it. We can get to that a bit later. Okay, so what are the building blocks of Postman flows? The building blocks are these blocks. There's 3 different ones. You can see there's action blocks, information blocks, and decision blocks. But these are what allow you to create a flow. And each of these blocks has specific purpose, performing actions, creating information, making decisions. And you see they have inputs, outputs, sometimes both, sometimes just one. And that's what allows you to create this flow and make some data flow between one to the other. So the action blocks, for example, the send request one, performs an action, like getting information from an API. So I'm sending a request. There's still seats at the front if you want to sit, by the way. There's a lot of seats here and there. So the action block, like send request, gets data from an API, sends it somewhere else. Decision blocks, it changes the data. So for example, based on what's coming from my API request, if the value is true, I'm going to do and call this one. If the value is false, I'm going to go and do this one. That's a simple example. And that allows you to proceed through the flow. The information block, it's more like if, again, you have someone else that's using that, you can have a text block that describes what this does, just like a markdown documentation of your flow. Here's a specific block, so that's the send request, probably the one that we use the most. So if we look at it, there's the quick description, there's the name of the block at the top. On the number 2, you can select which request you want to run. So here we're going to go ahead and select my get Pokemons, for example, and we'll use that example actually later. The send event input, so it starts running the block whenever something goes in there in number 3. Environments, so if you're familiar with Postman, you can create environments, for example, a production environment, staging environment with different variables. So you can switch between these to have your flow run against a different type of environment. Body type, variables, and then at the right-hand side, you've got 2, success and failure, and that's how you can also do some decision-making. If the request is successful, you'll go out of the number 7 and you'll do something. If the request failed, then you can just stop the flow here, so don't do anything, or you can actually go and do something else, maybe trigger a restart of your application or something like that. So far, so good? Cool. Then I guess it's time we jump into it. So for those of you who want to follow along, that's the link where the workshop is. I'm going to go through it anyway. So again, if you don't have a laptop, it's fine. But also, yeah, if you want to do that later, take a picture of that link. We'll be sending it by email anyway to all the attendees. But if you can't wait for the email and you just want to jump on it straight away tonight, you can take a picture. Okay? Okay, let's do this. So I'm just going to change my displays to mirror. Cool. And now we should be seeing everything. Let's try and make it bigger. Okay. Is this visible for everyone, even at the back of the room? Hopefully. I'm going to try to zoom in as much as possible on most things, but hopefully that should be good. Okay, so for those of you who have followed the link, this should lead you to this page. Sorry, not this one. This one, the quick start one. So we'll do two things. First one, we'll create a simple flow, which checks whether a website is up or down. So this one is just going to teach you about adding a block, sending a request with it, and then seeing the response. And then we'll do a second one, which is going to be a bit more advanced, where we're going to play with a Paginated API. So chances are, if you've played with APIs before, you've had the case where you have an API that has pages, and then you have to call it several times. So what we're going to do, we're going to automate how we can loop over, get all of the data, and print it out for us to play with. So first one, I'm going to go to, let me clear this up. So that's my Postman session. I have a free account, so everything that I'm going to do again is available on the free account. I've not done much in this. I only have a couple of collections that are going to be used later. But the first thing we're going to do is go to this workspace and fork a specific collection. So Postman Flows are still based on collections. So collections in Postman, if you're not familiar with them, it's a set of requests. So you may have 10 requests. You can save them in a single collection, and then you can use that to call them from Postman Flows. So I'm going to go ahead and create a fork, and I'll bring it to my Postman for Advanced. I'm going to call it Basic Quick Start. For some reason, interesting. So this demo is very reliant on the internet. So as long as we have internet, we're good. If we lose internet, it's going to be troubles. But hopefully we'll keep it for the whole way. So I have that collection in here, and now we can get started. I'll go in the Flows tab in here. Let me actually make it bigger. Cool. So I'll go in the Flows tab on the left, and I'm going to create a new flow. Call it. So when you create it, it loads your canvas, and I can give it a name. I'm going to call it Quick Start. And that's it. That's how you start. It's a blank canvas, and then it's up to you to use your imagination or, just follow the workshop and look at what the instructions are. So it's going to ask you to add a request, and we'll add a request to down detector and sitemap. So let's do that. I'm going to come in here, and I can say there's different ways to do it. So at the bottom here, you see there's a bunch of actions: undo, redo, zoom in, zoom out, etc. And there's this plus block to select blocks that you want to add. Or the other way to do it is directly from this start block, which is the one where your flow starts from. I can click and drag and say, OK, the next one is going to be send request. So now I've got this send request block. I can click in here and start browsing the different collections that I have in my workspace. So I'm going to go send request, down detector, and sitemap. And one good thing to do, and that's not specific to flows, I think, any of you who's a developer here, is always debug as you go, right? Don't wait to build the entire thing to see that actually one of the things at the very start didn't work. So I've only did this, but I can already run my flow and see what's happening. So something happened. You may have seen there was some data flowing from one to the other. Let me actually make it bigger. Hopefully. But how do I see what's happening? I just see there's a check, so I guess it worked. So at the bottom left here, you've got the console. So if I click on here, I can see what's happening. So I can see there was a GET request that was made to this, and I can actually go and see the details, see the response body, etc. Other things I can do, I can actually add a block, another one, and I'm going to look for the log block. So I can put this here, and I'm going to take the success. So again, taking the exit of the success here, and linking it to log. Oh. I have a very big cursor, so trying to aim. Yeah, there we go. And then same again, this is going to push whatever comes from this to the logs. So if I run it again, and I keep the console open, now I can see the bodies like here, and I can see what's coming out, etc. So that's simple workflow. I have a start or a request that's being sent, and I just output what's coming out. Let's see. Now let's do this one. So we'll use the evaluate block. So it's one of the, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so all of the this will use the status code. Anything that is considered a failure, so no 200 is going to go, like 400, 300 is also going to be, actually no, 300 is going to be redirect, so that should work. But any 400, 404, 401, 405, any 500 is going to go through failure. We can try that if you want. So what type of failure would you like to catch? Okay, yeah, so that's actually a good thing, because one of the things we're going to do now, so we're going to add a evaluate block. So I'm going to zoom out a bit now, just so I have more space to play with. One of the things I can do in here is, you can see I have a value coming in, but let me get. Okay, so I'm going to call this, I think, response status. And then in the path, don't know why it's not letting me run it once. See, that's the live demo thing. Why is it not letting me edit the status? Just give me 1 sec. Try this. So I'm going to do it again, put it from success, say evaluate. There we go. So it was because it didn't know what was coming out. So I've got this status, and from here, I can actually go and check the HTTP status. So that is your question, right? So I can evaluate that the status is going to be 200 or 300 or 400, and I can take decisions based on this. So from this writing SQL query, so SQL is Flow's query language, where you can write your test or your decision making. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and type in status equals 200. And now you can see at the bottom, I've got this little thing. It tells me it's already true. The status of my request was true. And then I've got this results thing here. And based on this, I can also take some decisions. So that result is either going to be true. If the status code of my API request was 200, this is going to be true. Or if it's something else, it's going to be false. So for those of you, again, following, we can log here. So I'm going to log it. And we can see in the console again, now if I run it, I'm only getting the status. Make sense? Easy? Anyone lost already? No, good news. Okay, because now this was the easy one. Now we're going to make it a little bit more complicated, and we're going to go for the second examples where we do pagination. So this is fine, and the reason why this is fine is it's very easy to understand because it just goes from left to right. It's a single line. Now we're going to start adding loops and conditions. Actually, one quick question. In the room, who's a developer or would call themselves a developer? Come on, don't be shy. No shame in being a developer, you know? Okay, so we have who would call themselves maybe product manager? Okay. 5, no shame in this either. Let me think of other roles that may be around here. Who's more of an exec? Okay. Have a couple. Cool. All right. So I'm going to go ahead, create a new flow. Yep. So this is all API based, but it's not only getting data. Nothing stops you from sending a post request, right? So you can anything you can do with APIs, you'll be able to do it from here. But there's no, if you're talking about getting data from a database, for example, right, and SQL requests, this you won't be able to do unless the database has an API, right? So for example, MongoDB, they have an Atlas API. This is an API that allows you to call MongoDB's data. So you'll be able to do that, but you won't be able to access directly a data source. Make sense? Yeah. Okay, so this one is going to be pagination. And so this is the next one. I think there's still a couple of you following along, so I'm going to keep on like pointing to this one. Let's create a new request. So I'm going to go ahead, click the plus, and say I have a new collection. It's going to be Pokemon. And in that collection, I'm going to add a request. And this is going to make a request to the Pokemon API. Get Pokemons. So if I try it here, I think most of you will be familiar with this UI. This is Postman. I can just send a request in here and see what's happening. But if we look at it, we can see there's a total of 1,200 Pokemons. They've definitely added a ton. And there's a next page. So if I wanted to do that manually and look at all of the Pokemons, I would need to then take this link, send this one, then take the next page, send this one, and I would need to do that as many times as there are pages. So now we're going to look into automating this, right? How do I make sure that I don't have to do all of this manual work and I can get all of the data saved? So I'm just going to save that request, keep it ready for using later, and I'm going to move back to my flows. Let's do the same thing we did before, right? We always start with sending a request. So I'm going to go ahead and search my Pokemon, get Pokemons. There we go. So if I run this, let me actually clear the console. If I run this, same thing happens, right? I get my results. It's fine. And now let's do a bit more advanced stuff. So every time we want to get the next page, it's a different URL. So we need to make this a variable so we can edit it on the fly, right? So we're going to replace the URL with this variable. So if you're, the other way. If you're familiar with variables in Postman, you use curly brackets. like this, double curly brackets, the name of the variable, and then closing them. And then Postman is just going to look in all of the different variable scopes to find a variable that's available. So that scope can be at the collection level, environment level, global level, etc. So now that I've done this, I can see there's a variable that comes up here, and I'm now able to set a variable here. So I can say, yep, let's do text, string, and here I'm going to paste, let me just get it back, this. So immediately it does the same. All it does is now my URL is just a variable, so I'll be able to edit it on the fly. So we can send the request. We've done this. We connect the block, send it, and then create this. I kind of rushed through this one already. Okay, so we need to save the URL of the next page, because that's the one we're going to want to edit and loop over. So we can do this. If I can. There we go. We can do string. No, not this one. Get. Again. Select. So we'll use the select block, which selects data from whatever is coming in. So I can already see I have the output of my previous API request. So there's the count, there's the next, and next is the URL we wanted to use, right? So if I get body.next, and I can actually log this so I can see what's happening. Now whenever I call it, and I look at the console, I'll have the URL of the next page. So there's an offset, and then a limit for the next 200. So once we have this, we can check for the next page. Yep. So that's. So let's do here. So we'll do a condition block, and that's where we get into the fun stuff. So my key is going to be body.next. So if body.next exists, then I want to keep on looping. If it doesn't exist, then I can stop my flow, right? So we have has next. If it's true, so I'm checking has next is different than null. For now, it is different. So as long as it's different, I'm going to go back to the send request. So it's going to start looking like this. And that's where I may need to zoom out a bit, actually. This looks very small. Sorry, not going to be for long. Okay, does this make sense? Okay, I see some nodes. So hopefully it makes sense. I'm going to quickly go through it before going further. I'm sending this request. I'm exporting the body.next. And then I'm checking if we have a next page. If we do, you can follow this one, which is going back to the send request. And if not, we can stop. So one thing we need to do now, we actually want to set this body.next as a variable. So we can do this, and we can do create variable. So what I did is from whatever is coming from here, I created a new variable, which is called URL. And that's going to immediately just update this one to this new one. I did say it was getting a bit more complicated, right? But so let's go back to here. I think I'm not forgetting anything. Oh, I am forgetting one thing. Oop. So the thing I'm forgetting is logging the results. We do want to see the results. So the same way I'm going to do select. And here we're going to take the results. And we're going to log the results directly in the console. Cool. So that should be it, if I'm not mistaken. Just checking I'm not forgetting anything. Cool. Oh yeah. Cool. So let's try and run it and see what happens. I'm going to clear the console and run. Aha, didn't work. So clearly I've forgotten something. Now we go into debug mode. So it ran it once, and it didn't loop. So something here is not working. Checking that it has an existing. Ah, okay, cool. So what I forgot to do is send back the data as well on this one. So let me clear the console, run it again. So before we look at the console, I'm just going to leave it full screen just so we can see what's happening. So this request is being sent. We can see here it's already finished, but if I run it again, some of the data every time is going to the results and being logged. And then every time it goes through here, also checks here. And you can see here it's actually switching from true to false. So it's starting with false, 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 because there's always a next. And then as soon as it switches to true, it stops. So now, if you look at the console, it's going to loop through, get me all my 1,200 Pokemons. And admittedly, it took me a little while to build. But now I've got a pagination thing working, and all I have to do is update the different, update the request here, and update the condition for what is the next page. Okay. Everyone following? Cool. So that's the. I'm checking the time. That's the very basics of flows. Yeah. Ah, very good question. So I'm just checking. When is my session finishing? I think at 40. So we have about 15 minutes left. So I had a bit more advanced stuff again to show. I don't think I'm going to have time, so I'm going to jump to this one, which is a very interesting question, which is, oh, I've got this in Postman. It's cool. Now, how do I get other people to play with it? First option is what you can do in Postman, which is create a team. Right? This one is a team workspace. So you can see there's like 2 little guys here. I can invite people. They can join this same one, get editing access, and they can play with it. So that's one. To note, the free tier, so the one I'm on, is limited to 3 people. So it's only going to be 3 people being able to collaborate. The other one is, there's a button here that you may have noticed, which is deploy. So what I can do from here, click it, and now I've got this webhook URL. And now I can call this from anywhere. And this anywhere could well be just Postman, because why not, right? This is what we do. We just call URLs. So now I can call this here. And this is going to trigger my flow. So if you go back to the flow, I can see the live logs. And you can see there's a little, this is gray. The gray one is what's coming out from the cloud version. So you can see there's also a little icon here. So that's one way to do it. I just have that. And this deploys a snapshot of it. So it deploys what I have at this time. I can go back to the editor. I can change some stuff. I could delete that, for example. That's not going to change what's being deployed. I need to deploy again to make sure that I have this version that's also available. I'm not going to do it because that's probably going to break it. So that's one thing. But now, another thing you can do, because that's interesting, you can just trigger something. What if you want to send some data, right? Maybe you want to have, and that's the flows that I want it to be next. It's how do I trigger a flow and provide my own data? Maybe you want to provide a user ID. Maybe you want to provide a temperature or whatnot. If you go in the start block here, there's this little settings wheel. So if you click this, you've got the incoming data structure. So it can just be text, or it can be JSON. So from here, I could say, I require a user ID. And then here it's going to be random, or like example data. User ID, username. Username is Arlemi. And that's what's going to be used when you test your flow. That's the sample. But then when you call it through a webhook, it's going to look for user ID and username, and it's going to use what you send to it. It's not going to use these ones. But that's where you define the data model for it. And that's the way to do it. So this is another limitation from the free tier. You're limited in the number of deployments you can do per month. So if you want to do more, then you need to upgrade. But you should have enough to play around with. And again, everything you do in here, when it's not deployed, doesn't count against this. So you can spend your time playing, like building, etc. And when you're ready, deploying it. So for when we were talking about IoT use cases for your like connected home, for example, that should be enough. So if I click here, I can see the deployed version. Anything? I'm trying to think of things that I've missed that would be relevant. Obviously, so a couple things. When you click on any block, you can see the details here on the right-hand side. If there's people forking your flow, you can actually access that data here. And one kind of useful one, yet it's very much just aesthetic. You can color your flows. For example, you have send request flows. Again, we're talking about this one. So I can make this one green. And then all of my evaluation blocks or like decision block, I can paint them blue, just to make it easier. For this one, it's only 2 blocks, right? It doesn't really make sense. But it makes it easier when you have a much bigger workflow and you want to identify quickly, oh, this is all my send request blocks. This is all my condition blocks. Or maybe you can color them by type of API that you call, right? If you're calling different APIs. And you can actually see the links are also colored based on the block they're coming out from. Cool. I think that's about it for the flows. Kind of, again, it's a quick start. For those of you who have, I think most people took the picture of the workshop. So if you go back there, there's an advanced one, but I don't think you'll be able to do it on your own without me. So another resource that's pretty good that I would recommend taking is if you go to academy.postman.com, there's plenty of courses there, but one of them is the flows one. So if you go to course catalog and search for flows, this one, Get Started with Postman Flows. This is the advanced one. So you'll build, there's going to be loops, there's going to be colorful stuff, there's going to be plenty of stuff, and quizzes. You get a badge at the end. You can post it to LinkedIn, etc. If you want, you don't have to. But yeah, academy.postman.com, tons of like learning resources there. And speaking of resources, let me switch back to my slides, which are here. Do this. Oh, I think that was it. So, okay, we've got about 5-10 minutes left. Any questions? Yes. So the question is, can I send notifications from flows, right? So 2 ways. If there's an API to send a notification, you can add a flow, like a block, that's going to be, okay, based on this, send a request to PagerDuty, Twilio, etc. And then you can send a notification. There's no built-in way in Postman to get a notification based on your flow for now. So yeah, you can build it yourself. There's no built-in way to do it. I think there was another question at the back. No? Yeah.
It doesn't work on my work account, my enterprise account.
Yeah.
It only works on personal.
That's normal. So currently we have Flows is available on the free tier. Kind of give you an overview of how Postman thinks about this. The free tier is like the playground. Anyone that wants to play around with any Postman features, they'll find them on the free tier. So you should be able to do pretty much everything. But it's going to be limited to some extent. But for any like pet project or side project, it's going to be fine. And then as you go into the higher pricing tier, we have slower release process. So for example, enterprise every 3 months. So some of the stuff is going to take a bit longer to come there. And you'll have access to more things. So like, for example, I mentioned about deployment being limited on the free plan. As you go like higher and higher in the plans, you'd get more deployments available per month. So yeah.
More practical question. I'm just playing with it. It's very messy. I find. Is there a button to like
So there's this feed view thing. So that's just gonna like make it so like the flows fit in your screen. But there isn't a button that's just gonna like make them exactly lined up, etc. I'm personally very OCD with these things. I like it when it's well aligned with the right color, etc. So this is already not good for me. But no, we don't have a button to like arrange them. Yeah. Yeah. Let's do evaluate. Oh yeah. Well, just throw it on the side there, and then click this one again, and then it's even then it's just like a bit out. Okay, but yeah, it's I would like to see this one too, to be honest. So, all right. Any other question? No more question? Yes. There is no documentation generation for flows at the moment. You can document it yourself. So if you, if you go in here, you can add some text. So I can add a test block in here, which is very small at the moment because I'm very zoomed in. This accepts Markdown, so you can have blocks with Markdown, and you can put your tables in there. One of the things that I showed in my slides, actually, if we go back, I didn't demo it, but there's these dashboard nodes. So based on the data that's coming from the API, we can generate graphs. We can generate like a little, you can have a true, false that will do a button, different color, text, Markdown, etc. So this is also available, and that's very useful when you want to show, when you want to show a flow to a PM, for example, and you want to say, this is the data that's coming from this API, instead of what I did, which is going to the console, and then like looking at the small lines, you can put it in one of these and make it this way. One of the things that's coming up, and you may have seen it when I was playing with the flows, it's called forms. So instead of sending data through a webhook, you'll be able to fill in a form and then trigger the flow based on that. Okay, I'll finish on this, I think. Remember, this is the link to the workshop. This is my name. So if you want to connect with me, just please go ahead. And with that said, thank you all for joining. Come visit us at the booth, and that's it. Thank you.